Everybody. Well, it's late. It's 2:30 in the morning, and I'm getting ready to go to bed. But I just read about 2 seconds ago that Jim Gordon died, and we've had so many deaths in the last years, but especially the last few years. Gary Rossington just died. I get But that Jim Gordon, he was the drummer on Derek and the Dominoes, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, Derek and the Dominoes Live. He was on that first Eric Clapton solo album. He was the drummer for Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett when they did that super duper good live album, On the Road with Eric Clapton, Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett and Friends with Bobby Whitlock and Carl Rattle, which kind of was the nucleus of Derek and the Dominoes. And if you haven't heard that Derek and the Delaney and Bonnie album, you ought to hear it because that's some of Clapton's best work, and it's a really good album. But he was also on Glenn Campbell, Wichita Lineman, which is just a great song. He was on Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. He played a bunch for Gordon Lightfoot. I'm a big Gordon Lightfoot fan, and I've been doing quite a bit of Gordon Lightfoot lately here. And he played on a lot of the Gordon Lightfoot stuff in the mid-'70s, like Sundown, and he was on a lot of those remakes on that Gord's Gold album. So, but you probably know, if you know much about Jim Gordon, that in 1983, he was suffering from mental illness, and he went after his mother with a hammer and had to go to prison. He killed his mother with a hammer, which is inexcusable, obviously. But nonetheless, it's a tragedy that someone so talented and that made such great music, one of the great rock and roll drummers, ended up like that. I guess there's a lesson there somewhere that mental health can affect anybody, even the people who are so successful and talented, because he was definitely both. So he's been in a prison in California ever since 1983. My friend Bob McMillan, I used to play with, he always had a lot of the urban legends. He was always good for an urban legend or two, old school, pre-internet type legends. And he used to talk about how Jim Gordon was, in prison just collecting all this money from Layla. Of course, Jim Gordon wrote the piano outro for Layla, which actually was kind of copped from a Rita Coolidge song. He was romantically associated with Rita Coolidge. But Bob used to say, kind of tell the tale of how Jim Gordon was just this fabulously wealthy guy because he'd been in prison ever since 1983. And every time some radio station anywhere, anytime played Layla, he got a little bit of money, and you can imagine how much that would accumulate. Plus, he's in prison; he can't spend anything, so he was one of the richest. Sometimes it would be he was one of the richest men in North America or something. I don't know how true all that was, but it was kind of a good urban legend, despite the tragic origins of the urban legend. And I've heard that. I don't even know if they let you make money or keep money like that in prison. But anyway, he died, and it's very sad and tragic, inexcusable what he did. But I guess the legacy in music does speak for itself. You can't ever take that away from somebody. He was on some of the great rock and roll albums. And I watch Bobby Whitlock's channel quite a bit. He hasn't been making as many videos, but he always said that Eric Clapton and Bobby Whitlock got so they didn't get along at all, to say the least. In fact, that's probably their relationship might be one of the main reasons that Derek and the Dominoes kind of fizzled out after such a great album. But be that as it may, they were both great. Obviously, Clapton still is, but Jim Gordon. So a sad loss. Now he hasn't been out there all the time for obvious reasons. So, but his music, you still hear it all the time. There are a lot of bands from that period that they become Trivial Pursuit questions after a while. But his music's still on the radio every day in every major city in the country. And Layla has got to be one of the most significant rock songs ever recorded. And that was Jim Gordon, co-written by Jim Gordon and Eric Clapton. And so the one of the authors of Layla, passed away just now. And I just want to make this, yeah, and I'm going to give him a tribute and say what a great artist he was. You know, he did a bad thing. We don't ever want to excuse that, but I'll give tribute to one of the great rock and roll drummers, and R.I.P. And I hope he got some of the help or whatever that he needed wherever he ended up for the last 40 years. Thanks. God bless. R.I.P. Jim Gordon.